I would like to welcome you to my channel, That Middle-Aged Lady. My name is Denise, and in today's video, I wanted to give an update to several previous videos I've uploaded in regards to being diagnosed with vaginal atrophy and being put on Vagifem as my course of treatment, since it has been quite a while since I've given an update on this particular topic. If anything I talk about in today's video sounds like something you would be interested in hearing more about, all you have to do is go to my channel, That Middle-Aged Lady, and then search those individual topics out, as I do go into a lot more detail in them. And so my journey of being diagnosed with vaginal atrophy, just to give a quick recap, began after I went in for my annual PAP, and it ended up coming back atypical squamous cells of undetermined significance, which just basically means there was a slight abnormality that they didn't have any explanation for. And so my doctor said to just come back in 2 months to have the PAP repeated. And so in the meantime, I started to experience this intense burning in my vagina, along with a couple bladder infections as well, and then also a little bit of discharge. Coupled with the fact that I just had an abnormal PAP come back as well, I was a little concerned that maybe something more serious might be going on. And so I called the doctor's office to try and get in sooner. And then after I told him about my symptoms and he did a pelvic exam, that is when he determined that I had this vaginal atrophy, which basically means that the vaginal lining is becoming dry, thin, and inflamed due to a depletion in estrogen, which can happen after a woman goes through menopause. And he felt that the best course of treatment for me would be to put me on Vagifem, which is a low-dose estrogen tablet that comes preloaded into a disposable applicator that you then insert into the vagina, push the button where it then pops the pill out into the vagina, and you start out taking it once a day for 2 weeks, and then you go down to using it once a week after that. And so it took about 3 weeks before that burning in my vagina went away, which obviously I was very happy about. And then when I went back in to have the PAP repeated, it came back normal this time, of which my doctor was convinced the vaginal atrophy is what caused it. I continued to use the Vagifem until I started to notice that the discharge, the little bit of discharge I had been experiencing, was starting to get worse. It was starting to turn almost like a grayish blackish color until eventually turning brown. And so I went ahead and made another appointment with my gynecologist, and he said that because any type of postmenopausal spotting needs to be investigated for the possibility of either endometrial or uterine cancer. And just to clarify, endometrial and uterine cancer are basically the same thing. It's just endometrial cancer is found in the endometrial lining, whereas any other type of uterine cancer is found someplace else in the uterus. And so I asked him if this discharge could even be considered postmenopausal spotting, seeing that it wasn't the traditional red color. And he said yes, absolutely, because red blood just basically means that it's coming from someplace down lower, whereas a darker blood, such as like a grayish or blackish or a brown, just means that it's coming from higher up somewhere, and it's just taking longer to make its way out of the vagina. And then once it oxidizes with the air, it then turns it into that color. And so yes, it definitely still needs to be considered postmenopausal spotting. He then said he wanted me to make an appointment to come back in and have a vaginal ultrasound done, along with a sonohysterogram, which is basically where he would fill the uterus up with a saline solution to get a good look inside of there, and then also to do a biopsy of the endometrial lining as well. So I went back in a couple of months later to have both of these procedures done. The vaginal ultrasound showed that my endometrial lining was of normal thickness, which is good, since a lot of times when a woman has endometrial cancer, her lining will be thick. It also showed that I had a couple of fibroid tumors, which I was already aware of, and that I also had a small cyst on my left ovary that at that time was measuring right around 1 centimeter. He then did the sonohysterogram, where he filled the uterus up with a saline solution. Didn't bother me in the slightest bit. He then did the biopsy, which I can honestly say was the worst pain I think I've ever felt in my life. I don't know if that's normal, if every woman would feel that amount of pain, but I certainly did. And I made the decision, if God forbid I ever had to have another biopsy again, they would definitely have to put me to sleep this time. And then after I got dressed, he wanted me to stop in at the lab to have a CA 125 blood test done as well, which is a cancer marker that looks for the cancer antigen 125, which is usually elevated in a woman that has ovarian cancer, since an ovarian cyst is uncommon in a postmenopausal woman, seeing that it's usually caused from ovulation, and a postmenopausal woman is no longer ovulating. He then said that he would see me back in a few weeks to go over the results of both the blood test and the biopsy as well. As I walked out of the office that day, I thought, here I entered being worried that I might have endometrial or uterine cancer, and now here I was leaving being worried that I might have ovarian cancer instead. So isn't it amazing how in a couple minutes everything can change? And so I just did my best to get through the next few weeks until I could get back in to see him. Thankfully, the CA-125 blood test came back normal and the biopsy came back negative for any type of malignancy. And although the ovarian cyst didn't really meet the criteria for being cancerous, meaning it was under 5 centimeters, it was round rather than irregularly shaped, it was fluid-filled rather than solid, and it didn't have any blood supply going to it, the doctor still wanted to monitor it just to make sure that it didn't change, and so we set up an appointment 6 weeks from that time to go back in to have another vaginal ultrasound done. That cyst continued to fluctuate in size each time I would go back in every 6 weeks to have another vaginal ultrasound done. It started off as 1 centimeter, went down to just above a 1/2 centimeter, then went down below 1/2 centimeter, and then went back up to 1 centimeter again. And because ovarian cancer is an estrogen-driven cancer, meaning estrogen can feed cancer cells, I was concerned about staying on the Vagifem because the last thing I wanted to do was have it end up turning into cancer, or if, say, for some reason it was cancer, only make it worse. I did talk to my doctor about it, and he didn't seem too concerned about it, but I ended up making the decision to go ahead and stop using Vagifem at that time. So after having to go in every 6 weeks for over a year, I finally decided that I was just going to go ahead and have my ovaries removed along with my fallopian tubes as well, mainly because I didn't want to have to do this every 6 weeks for the rest of my life, nor did I obviously want it to turn into cancer, and so I just felt like that was the best decision for me. And so surgery went well, recovery time was amazing. I contribute that all to my doctor doing such a good job. But then when I went in for my 6-week post-op checkup, I found out that my uterus was actually starting to fall out of my vagina, only to later learn that it was actually my bladder and that I was in stage 3 prolapse. And I wondered, I knew something wasn't quite right because after I did have surgery and, after 2 weeks were up, I went ahead and tried to go back to using the Vagifem again. But then it kind of felt like something was in the way. Like normally I could push that tube thing up there and just pop it up and everything was fine. But there was some kind of resistance, like something was in the way. And so I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but when he told me that my bladder was falling out, that made perfect sense. And so obviously I couldn't use the Vagifem at that time either. And so we made the decision to go ahead and use a pessary ring, which is a silicone device that helps to hold either the uterus, bladder, or both of them in place when you have a prolapse. And that has so far worked very well for me. And again, these are all topics that I have done previous videos about. But then now that everything seems to be falling into place, ovaries are gone, don't have to worry about ovarian cancer anymore, bladder and uterus are being held in place by the pessary ring, everything seems to be going okay, I feel like it's time to now get back to using the Vagifem again, mainly because I have started to experience a little bit of burning in my vagina again. Could be the pessary ring. Anytime you have anything that's up there that's a foreign object, your body's kind of trying to reject it, saying, hey, this doesn't belong in here. So it could very well be caused from that. But just because I don't want the vaginal atrophy to come back, since it was not a very pleasant thing to go through, I think I am finally ready to start the Vagifem again. I've gotten, the okay from my doctor. He said, absolutely, you just have to start all over again, meaning you have to do it every night for 2 weeks and then once a week after that. So you have to start as if you've never been on it and you're doing it again for the first time. And so that is where I am at currently with my journey of having vaginal atrophy. Although the doctor did say the last time I was in, before I was ready to start the Vagifem again, that the vagina actually looked nice and healthy. And so he said I could wait if I wanted to, but again, I just don't want to get to the point where it's going to come back and I'm going to be in pain or have to go through that burning. And so at this point in my life, especially now that I don't have ovaries to worry about anymore, I think I'm just going to go ahead and start it from scratch, use it once a week, maybe even go down to using it every other week, and then see what that does for me. And so again, I know it's been a while. I just wanted to update everybody, let everybody know that although I had to stop using it for a while because of all these other crazy things that happened to me, I am finally ready to get back on that again. And so if you are a woman who was diagnosed with vaginal atrophy and have been using Vagifem, I would love to hear about your experience thus far as well. So I hope you'll feel free to leave a comment. And of course, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to leave them and I'll be happy to answer anything that I can. Other than that, I just want to thank everybody for following me on my journey thus far. It has been a crazy one, a lot of ups and downs, but I feel like I've finally gotten to a point where I can breathe for 5 minutes, and so I'm going to enjoy this and, you know, again, do whatever I can to prevent any other things from coming up in the future. And so hopefully, you know, taking the Vagifem again will prevent vaginal atrophy from coming back. And so other than that, I'll look forward to being back next time.